Hello my friends, HM here. Now in this video we are going to discuss this weapon that you can see up here in my YouTube thumbnail. It's a weapon that is plentiful in the US stores, and it's also a weapon that's very affordable, and it's a weapon that Russia can do nothing about. They can't stop it, and it will end the war in one of two ways. Either Russia is demolished in Ukraine and Ukraine just take their country back, or Russia realizes that it's pointless to keep fighting because they're going to lose anyway. And that's how the war will end. It might also be somewhere in between. It'll take a long time before Russia actually realizes that this is really pointless. They will lose an enormous amount of equipment and men, and then they pull out, beaten severely, but they pull out. It will end the war, this weapon. All it takes is that Biden signs a document allowing the transfer of this weapon to Ukraine, and another document allowing Ukraine to use this weapon inside Russia on military targets and on logistic hubs in Russia. Then the war will end. Now, it's a longer video. I have to make it a little longer because it's a big topic and there's a lot to discuss. And in my first part of my video, I will show you all there is to learn about this weapon. I made 2 videos before about this weapon, but now I have learned a lot more about it. It's far more capable than my initial investigation into this weapon. And the second part of the video will investigate how it will affect the war in Ukraine, both how it will affect how Russia can fight and also how it will affect how Ukraine can fight. And in particular, I'm of course interested in how it will affect the casualties of Russia. They will go up, and how it will affect the casualties of Ukraine, and they will go down. And then at the end of my video, I'll attempt to calculate how this weapon will affect the overall kill ratio of the war. Now, a kill ratio is that if you have a kill ratio of 2.7 in Ukraine's favor, it means Ukraine are killing 2.7 Russians for every Ukraine that the Russians are killing. That's currently what the kill ratio is, but that will change dramatically in Ukraine's favor, and that's why they will win the war. Now, if you think this sounds interesting, then you should keep watching because it's going to be a great video. Now, the weapon I'm talking about is this that is pictured right here. It's called the JASSM's missile system, and there are a couple of weapons that can do different things, and that is all based on this platform here. What makes this weapon super deadly is that it's a big weapon with a big warhead, and it's also invisible to the enemy. It's a stealth missile, meaning it cannot be seen by radar, neither airborne radar nor ground-based radar. Also, because it's a cruise missile, it uses a jet engine and not a rocket engine. A jet engine has far less heat signature than a rocket engine, and that means it cannot be seen from the satellite systems that both the US and Russia have that can detect ballistic missiles when they are fired. They needed that to detect a nuclear attack with ICBMs or intercontinental ballistic missiles against each other. But of course it can be used for other things as well, to detect launches of small ballistic rockets that are used in the Ukraine war, both by Ukraine and also by Russia. In particular, the ATACMS that Ukraine now uses is a ballistic missile, and it can be detected by this system. But this cruise missile here is totally stealth. It cannot be detected in any way by Russia. They won't see it coming. It will just be there, and they'll know about it when things blow up. So they won't have any warning to move their airplanes away or their ships away or air defense system. They don't have any warning, so it will hit its target every single time. And that's what makes this weapon very deadly. So let's look what kind of versions they have and what they can do. I have a spreadsheet that collects all that information. It's really the best way to see the facts here. Here I have this table with all the weapons that I bump into, and I take down the key characteristics of these weapons so I know what I'm talking about in my YouTube videos, and also because weapons interest me. They're full of technology that interests me. But here you can see this AGM-158 JASSMs. That's the weapon we talk about here. And it comes in many versions actually, and more versions than I knew about just a few days ago when I made the first videos about this weapon. It has a short range weapon that is 370 kilometers range, and it only costs $700,000. That's almost nothing. That's less than $1 billion for 1,000 of these weapons. And with the money we are spending currently on the Ukraine war, Europe has spent more than $200 billion, and United States just spent another $50 billion that they authorized to use on this. Then this weapon is really very affordable. We can deliver thousands of these weapons to Ukraine. And then you can see there's a longer range weapon that costs about $1 million, and it has a 926 kilometers range, which is an enormous range. But now I also found out that a new version has been developed, and it came into operation here at January 2024. It was approved for combat and use, and it has doubled the range of the previous longest range missile. It now has 1,800 kilometers range. That's very long, and that will be very important for my discussion later in the video when I assess what kind of damage it will do to Russian ability to fight this war in Ukraine. Now there's also a fourth version of this JASSM's missile that has been developed. It down here, it's called the AGM-158C. It's a long-range anti-ship missile. That one is not relevant for the Ukraine war anymore, but it will be relevant for a possible conflict over Taiwan. And I'll make a video about that will be forthcoming. So if you want to see that, subscribe to my channel, and then I'll have an interesting story to tell there about how this weapon can be used militarily, but also about the geopolitical situation about Taiwan and how this whole thing affects the world economy basically. But that will be for another video. Here we will forget about that weapon because it's not really relevant in this war. And also Ukraine has their own super effective Neptune missile. It's down here, it's made by Ukraine, and it sunk the Moscow missile destroyer of all ships. It's a ship that's supposed to defend really well against other missiles, but apparently this Ukrainian-made missile just took it down and sunk it. By the way, that video I made about that was my previous video. It got enormously popular in YouTube. I think it'll hit 30,000 views and several thousand view hours, and I got 1,000 new subscribers on that video. And if you look at the number of people who subscribe to my channel, that's just an enormous amount of new subscribers. So thank you very much for all the new subscribers, and I hope I can live up to your trust. But that aside, let's discuss these weapons here. What else can we see in this table? Well, we can see the speed of this weapon is 900 kilometers per hour, and that's the same for any of the versions of this weapon. Because we also know the range, we can easily calculate how long does it take for this weapon to reach its target. Well, the short-range 370 kilometer version of this weapon will take 24 minutes before it hits its target, and the 926 kilometer weapon will take 1 hour before it hits its target, and then the longest range, almost 2,000 kilometers, will take 2 hours. That's important to know because that's the only drawback from a cruise missile when you compare to a ballistic missile that has a rocket engine. Now, these rocket engines are a whole lot more powerful than a jet engine, and that means a ballistic missile will go a lot faster. And as you can see down here, we have the ATACMS. It has a top speed of 3,100 kilometers per hour, and that means when it has a range of 300 kilometers, it can hit its target 6 minutes later. So if you have something that has to be destroyed in a hurry, then it's a nice thing to send an ATACMS missile. Also, the ATACMS missile, one of the reasons that US is now giving away the ATACMS missiles is that they have quite a lot of them, 3,700 of them, and also it's an obsolete weapon. It's not radar invisible at all. It also has this heat signature, and it also has fairly short range, only 300 kilometers. So they have started production of a replacement for that missile that have much better range, 500 kilometers, and it can be fired also from this HIMARS system, but that's another side story. But I think you should know the difference between cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and what their advantages and disadvantages are. Anyway, the other interesting thing we can see here in this table is that the United States have an awful lot of these JASSM's missiles on stock. They have over 7,500 of the shortest range version of this missile. Then they have 3,500 of this 926 kilometer range version of the system. And then because the extreme range version, it's called the JASSM's XI for extreme range, they've only just started producing that. So I have estimated they have made over 50 of them because they started in January 2024 making this missile. Also, another thing you should see, and I have included in this table, is that last year in 2023, United States only made about 500 of the JASSM missiles each year because they only had one production line to do it on. But last year they decided, because of the situation in Ukraine and also Taiwan, that they needed to have more of these missiles. So it has been expanded to 2 production lines where they can make 1,000 of these missiles, and any version of these missiles can be produced on the same production lines. Now there's one more thing that this table here shows that's relevant for this video, and that is the warhead that the JASSMs has. It's a 450 kilo warhead, and of that only 120 kilo are actually explosives. The rest is hardened steel that enables this warhead to penetrate through concrete and then blow up inside a bunker instead. So it's also a bunker buster weapon. But it's also very good for destroying bridges because it can basically move through the concrete and then explode inside the concrete structure of a bridge and totally destroy the bridge. Now that's relevant for the use of this weapon, and I'll talk about it later on. And also you should know, how big is this warhead? 450 kilo. If you compare it with the warhead of the ATACMS, it's only 200 kilo, so it's more than twice as big. So it's a very big bang that this weapon carries. And also there's one more thing. There's a launch platform for this weapon. In my previous videos, I thought it could only be fired from strategic bombers or fighter aircraft that NATO have. And then Ukraine would only have one launch platform for this weapon. That would be the F-16 fighters that Ukraine just got. But it actually has another way to fire this missile, and it's called the Rapid Dragon system that has been developed by the United States and is also operational right now. It started testing it in 2022, and now it's fully operational for use. But it basically is a big container that you can drop at the end of a military transport plane, and then you can launch these JASSMs, a lot of them simultaneously. I'll show you some videos now about how destructive this weapon is, what kind of things it can destroy, and also how this Rapid Dragon launch system is for this weapon. So let's see how this weapon is working on different targets. There are some videos that the US Army has made of how this weapon works on different test targets, and let's play the video. Let me stop it right here. What is this that it's hitting here? It's a mock-up of a Russian anti-aircraft system, because of course it'll be used to hit anti-aircraft systems like SAM-300 and SAM-400 batteries, because this missile is stealth. They won't see it coming. They can't fire anything against it. They can't stop it. But let's see what damage it does. It totally obliterates this anti-aircraft system and any units that are nearby. Now the next test is the weapon attacking a concrete reinforced bunker or a mock-up of that. So it has to penetrate all this concrete here and then blow up on the inside. And what will then happen? Let's play it. It just goes through like butter and then it blows up. Let's see a little more. Another bunker here. It totally obliterates it. That's how the bunkers will be destroyed with this weapon. Now here we have another test of how destructive this weapon is. Again, it resembles probably an anti-aircraft system, and there are something that's covered here. I think it's vehicles that are covered, but they want to test how much destruction that nearby vehicles will get from this warhead, so they also know about that. Let's see it. Oh, it comes in and it destroys this and a lot of other vehicles nearby. This is a bunker that's deep in. This is 4 meters long, so this is a big hole in the ground. Let's see what happens. And then it goes into a bunker and then blows up there. And another bunker destroyed. So you can see some pretty powerful explosions, and it continues here. And we have another angle of an anti-aircraft system that's being destroyed by this weapon. Filmed from another angle, I think, and it blows up completely. And here we have some other vehicles stored, and they are testing basically how destructive that is on the entire anti-aircraft system. Now let's see one more video here where it comes in, filmed from another angle, down in this hole and attacking a concrete structure or bunker. It goes through the concrete like butter and it blows up. So this is a very convincing weapon. It can be used for a lot of targets in Ukraine war. Here we are going to see how this Rapid Dragon system can deploy a lot of these missiles simultaneously just using an ordinary military transportation aircraft like this Hercules C-130. Now this airplane is something that United States have built over 2,400 of, and Ukraine only need like 4 of those aircraft, and then they can launch 24 of these missiles every day. Well, let's see how it functions. So here you can see a parachute is dragging out a container. That container is now falling down here and it stabilizes. We also see it from the inside of the aircraft here. There was 4 missiles in this container, as you can see. And here we have another angle of how it's going out, pulling this out. And from the inside again, from another angle. The good thing about this is that Ukraine has lots of pilots that can man these airplanes. It's not really a problem. I think they should need a month or 2 civilian aircraft pilots for training, and then they can fly this aircraft. And then they don't have to use their F-16 fighter jets that has to be used for other tasks. Because in the video I made about this previously, I thought that this F-16 fighter jet was the only weapon that could launch this JASSM's missile. But it turns out that there is a more effective way to launch a lot of these missiles, and that's just using standard military transport aircraft. Now here we see that once the parachutes has stabilized this container so it doesn't dangle around, then the missile starts to deploy. Let's watch that. Here it's filmed from the inside of that container, and the missile is dropping down there. And they drop out one by one, and then they activate, and then they are basically launched. Another one drops out here. And that's how this works. The problem with launching this from the F-16 is that F-16 can actually only carry one of these missiles under the wing. In principle, it can carry 2, but the other weapons bay is taken by an electronic warfare system that will protect the airplane from being shot down by Russian anti-aircraft systems. I know that it's my own country, Denmark, who has developed this electronic warfare pod that is under one side of the F-16 fighter, and they will carry that for sure in order to avoid getting shot down by Russian anti-aircraft systems. So really one F-16 can only launch 1 missile, and then the F-16 fighter jets cannot be used for other missions that Ukraine need these airplanes for, like hunting down and attacking Russian Shahed drones or cruise missiles that are coming in. So how many of these missiles can be launched simultaneously from one of these Hercules C-130 transportation aircraft? Well, it can launch 3 of these containers that contain 4 missiles, and we can see it right here. One of these containers being loaded into one of these airplanes. That is 12 of these JASSM missiles in one go, in one sortie, from just one aircraft. Now, Russia today actually attacked Ukraine with 100 ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and another 100 Shahed drones, so 200 long-range weapons in one day. If we give Ukraine 10 of these Hercules aircraft, Ukraine can also attack Russia with 120 of these JASSMs in one go, and each of these missiles will be able to destroy something valuable for Russia. It could be a bridge, it could be an anti-aircraft system, it could be aircraft and helicopters in an airport. It could be command bunkers that Russia has. And now let's go to the second part of my video where I'll discuss what can be attacked in Russia and how it will affect the losses of Russia and also the losses of Ukraine when they deploy this weapon. And all we need US to do is approve the transfer of this weapon to Ukraine and also approve that this weapon is used inside Russia on military target and logistic target. Okay, let's start to see what kind of weapons that will be affected by the short-range version of this JASSM system. Now I have here a map of Ukraine and also Russia, and here we have the Black Sea and we have Crimea. Let's zoom a little bit in. I have measured a safe distance to the front line. That would be 250 kilometers. If Ukraine have a drop area of these JASSM systems from 250 kilometers from the front lines, then they cannot be shot down by Russian anti-aircraft systems because they're stationed all the way here about 70 kilometers away from the front line, and they only have 300 kilometers range, so they won't be able to shoot this Hercules C-130 aircraft down if it just launches its JASSMs from this distance. And here you can see the range of the short-range version of this JASSM system, and they can hit a lot of targets. In particular, they can hit all of Russia's anti-aircraft systems because they are stationed in this battle zone here, and also fewer of them are stationed up here inside Russia. So if Russia don't want to lose all of their anti-aircraft systems, and how many do they have of that? I actually have a table that shows that. Let me bring that in. It's a table where I have collected data that I update, and then I make a video about it when I have something to update. The last time I updated was back in April, so I have to make a forthcoming video where I update this table again. But it's basically all the different types of weapons that Russia has and Ukraine has, and how much has been destroyed of it, and how many stocks do they have of this. And you can see in April 2024, Russia had a total number of anti-aircraft systems left of 2,600, and that include all kind of things: anti-aircraft guns, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, surface-to-air missile systems, that's probably half of that number, and that's the most important one. Also radars, and also jammers and deception systems, so all of it. So that means if Russia has to pull back all of that gear in order not to have it all destroyed by these JASSMs, then they cannot shoot down the Ukrainian aircraft that are operating in this war. So the Ukrainian aircraft, they will basically get air superiority over the Russian troops, so they can bomb at will. They can also bomb them from high above, so the man-pad systems that Russia has, these small handheld devices that you can shoot at airplanes, well, they only work at short range, less than 4 kilometers. But if the Ukrainians know that there's no powerful anti-aircraft systems around because they've all been withdrawn not to be destroyed by this JASSM system, well, they could just fly high up, like 5 kilometers up, and then they're at zero risk of these man-pads and also zero risk of anti-aircraft guns that also cannot shoot that high. Now, of course, you could say, well, Russia still have aircraft. They could fly after these Ukrainian airplanes and then shoot them down with their anti-aircraft missiles. No, they won't have any aircraft, because if we go to the next map, here I have put in the mid-range version of this JASSM system. That's 929 kilometers range. That will basically force all the Russian aircraft to be removed so long away from the front line that they won't have any aircraft either to hit Ukrainian territory with. Or if they have an aircraft that is refueled mid-air and go all there, then Ukraine will know it's coming, and then they can just turn away, and it will take a long time for this aircraft to fly 1,000 kilometers in order to hunt down a Ukraine fighter jet that will be long gone before this aircraft is within fighting distance. But let's go back to this map here, because I want to tell more about what kind of targets that also can be destroyed by this short-range version of the JASSMs. Well, there's Russian command bunkers for the officers who are leading the war here. All of these are within range of the short-range version of the JASSMs, and we know it's a bunker buster. It can go deep inside bunkers and blow them up from the inside, and they're all located here close to their troops in this Donbass region, and also up here. All of these bunkers command post will be at risk. And you could say, okay, but Ukraine also need to know where these bunkers are. Ukraine's secret service has proven to be quite informed about what's going on in the Russian army. And also, I bet you that there are many plain soldiers that are really unhappy about this war and who hate nobody more on this earth than their superior commanders, who are torturing them and putting them through hell, going to this war that they absolutely do not want to fight. So they are snitching to the Ukrainian secret service on where these bunkers are, and then they can get their revenge when JASSMs hit them, so they can get the coordinates of these bunkers. So anti-aircraft systems and bunkers is definitely something that can be hit by this short-range weapons. And we can also see there are some bridges between Crimea and also the rest of Ukraine. If we zoom in here, we can see there's actually waterways between here, so it requires bridges to get anything from Crimea and into the rest of Ukraine. These bridges could be taken out to stop the supply that's coming here from Russia and into the battlefield here. But there are also other logistic hubs that can be targeted. Here we have the border between Ukraine and Russia, and we can see at least this part of Rostov where most of the stuff that flows in, it flows in from here and also over here through Crimea. And the short-range missiles are just long enough to hit bridges and railway bridges in this area. All of them can be taken out. Let's go to the longer range here with the 929 kilometer range. Well, then all of the bridges that are in the Rostov region can be hit. And we can also take out the Kerch Bridge. Now here we have a picture of the Kerch Bridge that are connecting Russia with Crimea. And where would you attack that bridge? Well, you would of course attack it on this span here. You'll attack it with one of these JASSMs going in and destroying this pillow. It'll just go inside the concrete, blow it up from the inside, and it'll just go down. And another one will hit it here. There's one more here, but I don't think it's necessary to take with that on. It will come crashing down. Now you can see there's actually two bridges here. This one is a railroad bridge, and there's also a road here. So you'll have two other JASSMs doing the same thing on the other side here, taking that down. And then this bridge is gone for the rest of this war for sure. They won't be able to rebuild it just with 4 of these JASSMs, and they won't be able to stop this missile either because it's stealth. There's nothing that can stop it. It will just come and that bridge will be gone. Now let's talk about how much that will destroy the Russian war effort. Let's go back here. If they can't bring anything in here, then they can't bring heavy ammunition in. They cannot bring diesel fuel in because they don't have any bridges to get in here to transport that stuff. Without diesel, without heavy artillery, they can't use their heavy artillery. They can't use their guns anymore. Without diesel, they can't even use their tanks or their fighting vehicles anymore because, you know, without diesel, they stop working completely. Of course, you can't move them around, but they can't even move their guns around. That requires electricity that's generated by a diesel generator in the tank so they can move the guns around. They won't have the weapons. All the heavy weapons will be taken away from Russia if this logistic is destroyed in Russia and they can't bring anything in. What about water? Well, they can probably dig some wells so they could still have water for the soldiers. And food, yeah, they can bring that in also in enough quantity because it's not so many tons that you need in order to feed a lot of people. But the tonnage from diesel oil and also heavy artillery, that's a lot. Plus all the heavy weapons that you'd also like to carry in because they keep getting destroyed, these weapons, and you need to bring more weapons in. All that stuff will stop. So what kind of heavy weapons does Russia have left if they can't use their land-based heavy weapons? Well, they still have an air force. But let's take a look at how that air force will be affected, and let's start with helicopters. Let's go back to this map here that shows the mid-range of these JASSMs missiles. That was 926 kilometers, and you know it has to be launched from 250 kilometers from the front lines. That means that Russia will have to move away all their aircraft, including helicopters and other aircraft, at least to 700 kilometers away from the front lines, or they will be destroyed by this missile. Let's take a look at those helicopters and how that will affect the helicopters that Russia is currently using in the war. And I'll bring in again my spreadsheet, because that's the best way to see it. Now here I have basically all the helicopters that Russia is using in this war and have in the Russian Air Force. They have this Ka-52 attack helicopter, and how many do they have of that one? They have 137, but the range of this one is 470 kilometers and it cannot be refueled mid-air. So they can't use their attack helicopter at all. They have another one here, Mi-28, that's also an attack helicopter. It has even shorter range, 400 kilometers. They had 112 of those. They have about 250 attack helicopters that they no longer can use. And I can tell you, a lot of Ukrainians are dying. A lot of Ukrainians' vehicles are destroyed by these Russian attack helicopters that are firing the equivalent of a Hellfire missile in the US Army. The Russians have something similar that they are destroying Ukrainian vehicles with. What else do Russia have of helicopters that are important for this war? Well, they have all the transport helicopters. They are down here. There's this Mi-26 Russian heavy transport helicopter. They have 44 of those. It can lift quite a lot, 20 tons. And then they have a lot of this helicopter. It's called the Mi-8. It's a Russian helicopter. It's also the most mass-produced helicopter in the world. They have made over 17,000 of them, but they export a lot of them and they made them for a long time. So many of them no longer exist. They are scrapped. What they have left in the Russian Air Force is about 800 of those transport helicopters, and they will also have to be pulled back. Now, if you don't have transport helicopters, then you cannot make any medical evacuations of your soldiers that are wounded. That means even a simple wound like shrapnel to an important vessel in your arm or leg, so you bleed out. Well, you can stop that by tying something tight around your leg or your arm so you don't bleed out and die. But unless you get to a sophisticated hospital so they can fix this blood vessel and have it repaired, what will happen is that you can't get to a sophisticated hospital because there are no evacuation helicopters. And what will happen is that you can either bleed out and die, or you can have this tied up, and then by the time you get to a sophisticated hospital, your arm or your leg would have to be amputated because there has been no blood circulation in it for hours, and then it's completely dead. It cannot be saved. So you will have even the simplest wounds of Russian soldiers, well, they will end with amputations and permanent disability of these soldiers. And a lot of people would simply die because they can't get to sophisticated medical care quick enough. And also, without transport helicopters, it means that Ukraine, whenever they attack on the front line, you know, the front line is not just packed with soldiers. Actually, it's more than 1,000 kilometer front line. And that means even if Russia has 500,000 people in this battlefield, half of them will have to be behind the front line and help with logistics and all kind of things. That's 250,000 at the front line. Divide that with 1,000 kilometers, and then you only have 250 soldiers per kilometer on the front line. That means Ukraine can launch a surprise attack just with, let's say, 2,000 troops. Shouldn't be impossible for Ukraine because they do have helicopters and they can move a lot of troops in there fast, but Russia can't. Without transport helicopters, they have no way of quickly getting a force created that can stop this counterattack. And that means Ukraine will be able to punch holes in the Russian defense lines because they can't get reinforcements there quick enough because they don't have any helicopters. So that's pretty bad for Russia. Now, that was the helicopters and the effect it would have on those. But what about the Russian aircraft that they have? Well, here we have this map again. The circle here has been put so you can see how long the range of this 1,800 kilometer range JASSM's missile is and how far away from the Ukrainian front line that Russia would actually have to pull out their aircraft in order not to be targeted by this missile. It's very long from the Ukraine border, about 1,600 kilometers. And that will mean it will take forever to just reach Ukraine. And only a few aircraft can actually reach Ukraine without getting refueled. And some of Russian aircraft can't get refueled. Let me bring this table in. It's much better to see it here. Here I have all the Russian aircraft. There are some aircraft that are more important than others that Russia simply cannot lose. And for instance, there's strategic bombers. These are heavy-duty bombers that can fly long range and also carry a lot of bombs. They have to be moved out of harm's way. And also there's another one that's even more important for Russia because they hardly have any of them. And that's the fuel tankers. That would be this one, Ilyushin's 78. They only have 20 of that aircraft left, and they will need it in order for the aircraft to reach Ukraine. But with only 20 left, they definitely have to move this tanker all the way back because they can't risk losing them. And then there's another aircraft here that Russia simply can't risk losing. It's this A-50 that is an airborne radar and command aircraft that Russia only have 6 left of. Now, here it says 14, that was one source, but another source says they only have 6 left in operation, and the rest is something they try to restore and bring it into functional form so they can use it. With only 6 left that is operated in the Rostov region just behind the front line, out of reach of Ukrainian long-range anti-aircraft missiles, they can barely keep half of the front line covered with this radar surveillance, and they definitely have to move that airplane 1,600 kilometers away from the front line. It would compare to losing half of these aircraft because now they have to spend like 2 hours just getting to the position where they can start monitoring Ukraine and then spend another 2 hours flying back again. Now they can be airborne for 8 hours. That means they lose half of their operational time in the air. And that means every day, half of the day, they don't know what Ukrainian aircraft are doing because they don't have any radar aircraft in the air that can monitor it. They will only be able to do half of the front line, half of the time if they have to move these airplanes that far away from the front line, and they absolutely have to, because otherwise they'll lose them to this JASSM missile. So that will be a catastrophe for the Russian Air Force. The strategic bombers, what about those? They definitely also move them back. They have this one, Tu-22. It's a good strategic bomber because it can fly 2,000 kilometers per hour. That's really fast. That means it's fast enough to drop glider bombs on Ukrainian front lines, but it only has 1,250 kilometers range, so it would have to be fueled with this fuel tanker or it won't be able to reach Ukraine. Because they only have 20 and they have to prioritize these strategic bombers, I'd say it could probably mean that all of their fuel tankers will be needed to serve that strategic bomber, and then they will not be able to use any of their other fighter aircraft because they'll also have to be refueled mid-air to reach Ukraine. But there's simply not enough Russian fuel tankers to do that job. So their entire fleet of fighter jets would also be grounded far behind enemy lines because they don't have the fuel tankers to launch sorties here. So all Russia has left now of heavy-duty weapons, if Biden decides to send this weapon, is their strategic bombers, and they can drop some glider bombs, but not many because they're restricted by the number of fuel tankers they have. And also their most numerous strategic bombers is Tu-95. They have 47 of that one, but it flies too slow at only 710 kilometers per hour, so it cannot drop these glider bombs. And why I'm talking about these glider bombs is that that's really the weapon that enables Russia to move forward in this war, because they drop these enormous bombs that can be 1 ton or 2 ton heavy, and they create this massive explosion and destroys everything. And it really is a pain for Ukraine to deal with these weapons. They can't stop them. But this JASSMs will diminish the number of attacks that Russia can carry on with these glider bombs on the Ukrainian front lines. Now, I talked about that in my previous videos, and I found a source saying that the maximum number of sorties that Russia can fly with their helicopters and airplanes is 150 per day. But with this weapon, where they have to withdraw all their airplanes pretty much, then the only sorties they can fly is with their strategic bombers, and it will drop down to maybe 20 per day, and only part of them can actually drop glider bombs. They have this Tu-22 that can drop glider bombs because it is flying so fast, 2,000 kilometers, and they also have this Tu-160 strategic bomber. By the way, the US owe Ukraine quite a lot. This Tu-160 strategic bomber, Russia only had 15 left of those, but Ukraine had 16 of these bombers in 1991, but they sold 8 of them to Russia, and then they scrapped the rest because of that agreement where UK and US promised safety for Ukraine. And they also got rid of their nuclear weapons. Ukraine also had a lot of nuclear weapons. So the US really owe it to Ukraine to give them this JASSM's weapon so they can defend their country. They have promised that in an agreement that Ukraine signed and US and UK signed to get rid of these nuclear weapons they had. This war would not have happened if Ukraine had strategic bombers still and also nuclear weapons. Then this war would simply not have happened. So they owe it. I really feel strongly about that. Now I've talked about all these things, and I probably missed a couple of things that also affect this battlefield if these weapons came into the battle. But I hope I have convinced you that this war will become impossible for Russia. They will lose so many men at the front line that they will prefer to pull out. But I also promised you that I would give an estimate of the overall kill ratio. How would it affect this kill ratio? We have the most recent kill ratio is 2.6. So Ukraine killed 2.6 Russian soldier and also equipment for every piece of equipment that Russia destroys of Ukraine. But it's not high enough because Russia is 4 times bigger a country, so they think they are winning. In their mind, they think, okay, we are winning, we just keep doing this, and then we will wear Ukraine up, and then we win. And that's true. So this Ukraine kill ratio has to go up. So what will happen? Well, if Biden authorizes this weapon to attack military targets in Russia and also logistics hubs so they can't transport all their heavy equipment into this battle zone, then I think that Ukraine's death rate will drop to less than half of what it is today. That means this kill ratio will double to 5, but also the Russians will take twice as many losses because they don't have any heavy weapons to fight with. They don't have air support anymore, and the Ukrainian fighter jets will have air supremacy and can just drop bombs on them at will. That will double double the Russian losses, also because they can't evacuate their wounded, so they all die from the slightest wounds. And that means now this weapon will be introduced, and now we're talking about a kill ratio of 10. 10 times more Russians will be killed, and 10 times more Russian equipment will be destroyed than Russia is able to destroy Ukrainian equipment and men. That means Russia will know that this is game over. They can no longer sustain this war. They will lose, and the longer they keep it going, the more men they will lose, the more equipment they will lose, and it'll just be punishing of themselves. The best thing for them to do is just to pull completely out and save what they can save by not having more people killed and more of their army destroyed. And that's why I think this weapon, if Biden allows it, it will end the war. It will be a hard decision for Russia to do, but I think after a couple of months, they'll do the right thing. And then they'll pull out. Either that, or they'll keep on fighting for a year more, and then there'll be nothing left. All Russians in Ukraine will be killed. All their equipment will be destroyed, and Ukraine will take the country anyway. They'll take the country back. But I hope you liked this video. I thought it was super exciting to make. I'll make many more videos in the future, so I hope you'll also subscribe and give me a like. And then once again, thank you for the 1,000 new subscribers I got from the last video I dropped. I'm very grateful for that. But I really think it's funny to make these videos, and I'll keep making them. All I have to say is I wish you a great life in freedom and democracy. Goodbye.